Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to do a little mixed media stamping, and this is easy. You can do this, guys, even if you have never painted before. What we're going to use is acrylic paints and some peg stamps from our sponsor, Rubber Stamp Tapestry. You can find them online at pegstamps.com and use the coupon code MIXED to save 20% off of your order of $10 or more mounted peg stamps. So it's a great way to try out this line of stamps. We're going to work on a hardboard panel today. This is a 4" by 6" Da Vinci panel, but you could also just prime a piece of hardboard from the hardware store. I've got a variety of peg stamps, and I will link all of those down below in the video description so you can find exactly what I used, and also some acrylic paint. And I'm using the Turner Acryl Gouache, but you can use whatever acrylic paint you have. Start off by taking some warm yellow paint with a 1/2" flat brush or whatever size flat brush you have. And you want to sketch in a horizon line about 1/3 of the way down on your board. And by dividing your panel up by thirds, it is naturally more pleasing. And there's a whole thing about it called the rule of thirds. But trust me, dividing it up by thirds makes it look really good. Now I'm going to add some yellow above and below the horizon line. This is kind of where the sun would just set. So the sun is just set, so we still have beautiful color in the sky, but we don't have that like semicircle that you see sometimes. Now, the reason I'm doing a sunset here is because sunsets are perfect for beginners. That's all you have to do is worry about mixing and playing with color. And as long as you stay with color friends, which are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, you're not going to get mud. So after we're done putting that yellow in, we're going to grab a little red on our brush, and that's going to mix and make some orange. And so we're going to overlap the edges where we just put the yellow, and we're going to bring that color above and below the horizon line. So we're going to end up with a scene kind of at a pond where we've got the sunset reflecting from the sky into the water. So it's a really easy motif, and even if you don't want to stamp and you want to paint, a sunset background with a black silhouette is a great beginner project. That's why you see so many sip and paint places doing that, because it's a very easy achievable, great first, ace in the hole type of project, and it's really fun to do. So now I've cleaned off my brush and I'm grabbing some purple, and because that red I had there didn't feel like it was going to mix a very good purple for me, so I'm just grabbing some purple and adding that next to the red and just dragging into it slightly. Now take care that you don't get the purple into the yellow areas, or that will make mud, because purple and yellow are opposites on the color wheel. So if you feel like you do need to fill in a little bit, clean your brush, go grab the other colors you need to fill in. You do not want to drag that purple into the yellow because you don't want to get brown in your sunset. So you want to continue on in this fashion and fill in the foreground of your painting here, which is the water, with more red and purple paint. Now, if you have more sky than I do, you'll want to go on and use a little blue above the purple. I really kind of forced it in here. I really didn't need it on the size panel that I'm using, but since I added it in, I decided that I would go ahead and put with some purple, make some clouds, and then also add a little bit of that blue towards the bottom edge of the canvas, just so that it all matches. Oh, and one thing I want to tell you, because we're going to do some stamping, we're working on a hardboard instead of a canvas. If I was to work on a stretched canvas, there'd be too much bounce there to get a really good stamped image, and also the texture of the canvas is bumpy, and I wouldn't be able to get a good impression with stamps as small as the peg stamps and rubber stamps. They're a harder stamp. If you had just a really big outline silicone or clear stamp, you could do that on a canvas, but the results wouldn't be so good on like a canvas panel or a stretch canvas. So that's why I'm suggesting you use a hardboard for this. You could even do this on like a wooden box, a cigar box, anything you have that's like a hard wooden surface would be perfect for this. You could even do it on paper if you like. I decided that the clouds are too dark, so what I'm doing here is taking some white paint and going over my dark clouds, and also adding a few others. As my paintbrush gets dirty, I'm just cleaning it off, grabbing more white paint, and painting in more clouds. Now, I want my clouds to look kind of golden, like when the sun goes down, all the clouds in the sky get this beautiful golden tone to them, and that is what I'm going to paint. But I need that white base underneath, otherwise my yellow is going to look very muddy. Let the white paint dry, then you can go over it with some yellow paint, and you'll see that it really glows and looks fantastic. Then you can go ahead and add some ripples into the water area of your painting if you desire. And then you got to let the whole thing dry so that we can begin stamping. To make my little acrylic paint stamping pad, I took a little bit of packaging styrofoam that I save whenever I get packages in the mail, and I squirted out a little bit of black paint and brushed it across the surface, and that gave me a really nice stamping pad. And there you can see I stamped that heron on there just like I would if I was using black ink. And I prefer to stamp with acrylic paint than black ink on a panel like this because sometimes your black ink would be a little transparent and you would see the other stuff below. So now I'm using this lily pad stamp, and it's really important to look at the registration marks when you're doing the lily pads because they are foreshortened, they're tipped away from us. If you have it crooked, it's going to look a little weird. If that does happen to you and you get a crooked lily pad, then just stamp a couple next to each other so it looks like you have a rock or just a mass of lily pads instead. That's a good way to correct it. I should have taped my little piece of styrofoam down before I put the paint on it because it does want to move when I go to put my stamp on it, but it's not a big deal. And then I can throw it away when I'm done. So perfect way to stamp with acrylic paints. And now I'm using the smaller lily pad, and again looking at the registration mark so that I can make sure I don't stamp it crookedly. In the smaller lily pads, I'm going to work around the bigger ones, but also further up in the canvas panel because having things further away from you, you'd want them smaller, and that gives you the sense of perspective and the sense of this being a three-dimensional scene instead of a flat scene. So you can see I'm putting the lily pads up a little bit higher, and where I got that crooked one, you can see how I stamped another one on top of it just to kind of disguise it a little bit. I'm not sure how well it worked, but I didn't want a crooked lily pad. So just make sure you keep an eye on your registration marks and make sure you have your lily pads horizontal. I wanted to have some grasses and weeds growing around my lily pads, so I took this seaweed stamp from a kit that I had, and I just randomly stamped it around, and I tried to either connect it to a lily pad or have it go off the bottom of my panel. That way it would be grounded and they wouldn't be like floating in midair. I guess they could look like they were coming out of the water, but I was a little afraid that they might look a little bit floaty if they weren't connected to something. So just kind of keep that in mind. And if you get a bunch of paint on the outside of your stamp, you can wipe it off with your finger, but I find as long as you don't rock the stamps on these hardboard panels, they tend to stamp really well. They're actually much easier to stamp on than a lot of things because you have such a firm surface, and your peg stamps have a bit of cushion on them already. They're just very easy to use on this. Just like I said before, avoid using a canvas panel or a stretch canvas because you're going to have that texture of the canvas, and if it is a stretch canvas, you're going to have that bounce, and it would make it quite difficult to stamp on. The thing I love about the peg stamp sets is that they all go together. So here I'm grabbing another little shrub branch thing from another kit and adding those shapes in as well. I feel like getting a little variety here where the grasses are, it just makes the painting a little bit more interesting. And there you can see, when I tip it, you can see it without the glare, which is kind of nice. Now I'm using the little kind of seed pod like stamp from the Lotus Garden, and I'm going to put that 3 times in my scene. And I like to do things in odd numbers or in threes because your brain finds that a little bit more pleasant. I find when you have even numbers, it seems a little discordant. It's kind of like your brain wants to match everything up. I wanted to give some further illusion of perspective in this painting, and I thought it would be nice if you were kind of maybe nestled back on the porch of a bungalow and you had some like trees around you. And so I'm using this branch from the Aloha set to create a little bit of a frame or overhang on the top and the left hand side of this picture. That gives you that kind of third dimension. You have something in kind of in front of everything, and it just makes it feel a little bit more full, and it pushes the pond back a little bit so you get a little bit more perspective. Now I'm using a small round paintbrush to make sure that my leaves don't just float around in the sky. So I'm just pulling out some little branches to attach them to the edges or the invisible tree that's beyond the canvas, so it just looks a little bit more pleasing. Now because the scale of the peg stamps is rather small, you may want to put in something else for scale, and a very easy thing to paint is cattails. So I'm putting in 3 of the cattail heads, which are just basically kind of like long ovals, and then I'm just pulling down a straight line for their reeds, and that just again gives you that scale. It shows you that the bird is pushed further back in the scene, and it makes the entire scene a little bit more believable and a little bit more realistic. To unify the painting, I took a little bit of black paint on a flat brush and just kind of gently rouged the edges. It's kind of like if you were making a greeting card, how you might take a black ink pad and ink the edges to make it look framed and finished. Well, that's what I'm doing here. That's going to help me anchor the leaves to the invisible tree on the side. It's going to help me anchor the lily pads and give a little weight to the bottom, and it's just going to give me a nice finished edge on the top and sides of the painting. Now this part is totally optional, but I want to clean up the edge of my my panel here, so I am just painting every side with that same black paint that I stamped with, and that is just going to make it look really slick and finished when I hang it up on the wall. And there you have it, a finished painting that took you hardly any time. You got to learn how to mix colors and do some new types of stamping, and I know you can do this, so I do hope you try. And if you're too nervous to do it on a canvas, go ahead and do it on a greeting card, because acrylic paints are totally fine to use on like a watercolor paper or like a heavy Bristol or heavy cardstock. Just have fun, use what you have, and enjoy the process. If you want to find any of the stamps that I used today, you can find them at Rubber Stamp Tapestry. Check them out online at pegstamps.com, but don't forget to use the coupon code MIXED to save 20% on your order of $10 or more of mounted stamps. But don't wait, that deal is over on August 7th, and I'd hate to see you miss out. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting!